Did you see it?
Hey guys, good morning. My name is Sam. This is my colleague Janus.
Hi.
And on today's live stream, we're going to build a PC. This is interactive, so if you have questions, you can go in the YouTube chat and ask them. One more thing, we have some great prizes we'll give away after the live stream. So if you go on our Facebook page, you see a post about that. Give that post a like and a comment, and on tomorrow's OC live stream, you'll be entered to win. All right, first things first, let's go over the hardware we have here. We have, of course, the Gigabyte G7 motherboard. It's a great mid-range board for all you gamers out there. We have an Intel 6th Gen CPU. It's a Core i5. We have some G.Skill Trident Z RAM, a trusty Cooler Master cooler, a Gigabyte 1000 watt modular PSU, a Gigabyte G1 970 graphics card, and of course a trusty DVD-ROM drive. All right, Janus, what's first?
The first step, we will put the CPU, memory, and the cooler on the motherboard.
Okay, great. Now, with the CPU, you have to be very, very careful. It's quite fragile. So, you open up the lever first and place the chip onto the socket. Now, you'll notice that there's a small arrow on the bottom of the CPU. Align that with the socket. You know, if it won't go in the socket, don't force it in, or else you might break it. Okay, next up is our thermal paste. So put a tiny bit of that on the CPU, and this helps the heat from the CPU be absorbed by the cooler. Okay, now, once that's done, you can place the cooler onto the motherboard. Make sure you line up the holes and give that a screw in. Now we have our first question from the crowd. So the PSU right there is a 1000 watt PSU. Now, it's always important to make sure you have too much power. If you have not enough power, you'll have issues with, your computer not booting, and it just won't work. So I have actually a link I will show you on the stream that will link you to a calculator where you can put in all the parts you have on your computer and make sure that that you have enough power from your PSU. All right, so once we have that cooler screwed in, it's almost done here. We can move on. So the cooler is important because your CPU gives us a lot of heat. Now, if you don't have a cooler on your CPU and try to do it without a cooler, you will fry it in seconds. So it's important to have a cooler. You can buy a cooler like this, it's an air cooler, or CPUs also come with a stock cooler that's included, and that will be just fine to use. Alright, so once that is connected to the motherboard, there's one more step, and that is making sure the fan has power. So motherboards come with a special power port for that on the right. In our case, it's beside the RAM sockets, and that makes sure you have power to your fan so it spins. Alright, what's next?
Next, we will set up the memory to the motherboard.
Exactly. So we're using DDR4 memory. DDR4 is the latest gen spec memory. It has a lot faster clock speed than DDR3. And so when you install the memory, you have to make sure to use the right socket. So you'll notice that our sockets, they are red and black. If you plug your RAM into the red socket, make sure you also plug it into the next red socket. The reason why is because on the motherboard there are numbers by the sockets, and they will tell you which one you have to use, but it's easiest just to use the different colors. And with the RAM, again, that's quite fragile. So if it won't fit in the first time, just do it again. The RAM has a small indentation on it, and this will line up with the socket. And if it won't fit in, just make sure it's lined up properly and push it in gently. When it's plugged in, you'll hear a nice click. Okie dokie, what's next?
Next step, we will put the power supply to the chassis.
Okay, now this here's a modular power supply. So when we say modular, that means it has all these plugs in the back, right? So you only have to plug in what you need. On a non-modular PSU, you'll have all these cables. The problem is, if you don't need all the cables, you have extra cables which might impact airflow. So definitely you want to go with a modular PSU. It is a lot easier to use in the end, and in the end you will have a much cleaner build inside. So on our case, we have the PSU space at the bottom. Now in some cases it can be at the top, but it definitely varies depending on the case you use. So that slides in nicely down there. And once that is lined up, you have to screw it in. It's important you screw it in tightly, because if you have to bring your case somewhere, like to a LAN party, and it's not screwed in properly, it might come loose and you'll have some damage to your components. Again, with a PSU, you have to have more power than you need. If you say have a PSU that has 800 watts and you need 1,000 watts, you'll have problems. But in this case, we're going to give ourselves some extra leeway because we don't need 1,000 watts with our setup. But if we had more VGA cards and more drives, like a RAID array, we might come close to needing that kind of power. Okay, so once that's plugged in, we can plug in all of the cords to the back of the PSU. Now again, with a modular PSU, you only have to plug in the cords you need, right? If we had a non-modular PSU, we would have issues with that. And you can see, there are a number of cords we can plug in, and we have them nicely placed in the case, and it's all good. Okay, Janus, what's next?
Next step, we will put this back I/O panel to the cases.
Okay, so our case comes with a nice back I/O panel. Can I see that for a second?
Yep.
This panel shows you all the ports, what they are. So, your microphone and speaker, ports are the same. Not are the same, they look the same. But with this I/O port, I/O shield in the back, you will know what's what, because if you plug your speakers into the microphone port, it won't work. So once that's in there, you'll hear a nice click, and it will be in there securely, which is a great thing to have for your case. Now, it also has LEDs on the back of it. So if you have a low light scenario, you can see what's your Ethernet, what's your USB, so on and so forth. So it's much easier on the eyes. Okie dokie. So it's time now to make sure we have all of our standoffs on in the case. These standoffs are small copper things that'll make sure that your motherboard does not come in contact with the case. Because if you do have a connection between the case and the board, you could have a short circuit, which would definitely damage parts of your computer. It's also important to make sure that you don't have any extra screws or anything between your board and your case, because you could have a short circuit as well. So make sure the area is clean and you don't have any thing that would cause a short circuit. So one more thing, you'll notice that on this case we have numbers below all of these standoffs, okay? These numbers line up with this chart right here, where you can't probably see it, but it's a chart on the case that shows us, if we use certain motherboard sizes where we have to align it. So there's different sizes of different boards, and we want to make sure that we have the standoffs in the right place because not every board is the same. Okie dokie.
Okay,
Now it's
step.
time to mount the board. So this part you have to be very careful because this board is of course fragile. You want to make sure that it's all lined up with the standoffs, and that way you can have a nice connection, and you'll make sure that it's secure, because look, if it's not secure in the case, you'll have big problems. If you're trying to move the case, it could come loose and you damage everything. Alright, so now we're going to screw in the board to the case, and during this part of the install, you have to be very careful because, hold it there, because if you apply too much force when you're doing this part, you could damage the board or damage the screw. So we have a number of holes we have to screw it in. It's important to make sure it's screwed in tightly because if it's not screwed in tightly, it might come loose and you'll damage everything. So there are a number of holes along here. Make sure you have them all screwed in tightly. Now, just to remind you guys, on our Facebook page, we do have a great contest going on for some awesome prizes. Enter the contest, give that post on the page a like, and give it a comment. And on tomorrow's live stream, we'll announce the winners of this contest. Okie dokie, so we almost have it completely screwed in. And again, if it's not properly screwed in, you could have the screws falling into the case and causing a short circuit, which is just lethal for the board. You don't want this board to die because of a screw, behind the board on the case. Okay, what's next?
Next, we will connect all the power cable to the motherboard.
Okay, yeah, so with the power, there's a number of power ports along the board. And so the first is right beside the RAM. That's our main connector, and you can put it in gently, and once it's connected, you hear a nice click. So maybe... Yeah, so this is also why you have to have a very nice cable run through the board, through the case rather, because you might have difficulties installing the cables and making sure they're connected properly. So it's almost in right there. Just it takes some love sometimes, but that's part of the fun, right, guys? Okay, we almost have that connected. And once that's connected, you'll hear a nice click. It's almost there. But again, this is why it's fun to build your own PC, because you understand, all the parts inside, and understand why it's important to have lots of care when doing this. Alright, so we're going to now install the second connector. And beside that is a small connector that will power the LED lights on the back I/O panel. So it's a bit tricky, as Janus knows, to plug this in, but just be patient and you'll eventually get it. But also, make sure you do this, because otherwise, if you don't do this and you just don't plug in the LEDs, you won't have a nice lit I/O panel. So, okay, when you want to choose a case, you have lots of options, right? These days, every company has a number of different cases out there. The most important thing about the case is the board you have inside it. There's different sizes of boards, and the case has to fit the board. if you have a mini ITX board, it won't fit into the wrong case. And also the PSU as well, right? PSUs are different sizes, as well as power, and a big PSU might not fit into a smaller case. Okay, so our next step is to
connect the USB 3 front panel and the audio to motherboard.
Right, so any case has very convenient front panel USB and audio ports, and these connectors have to be connected to the board somehow. So there are wires in the board where you can connect these things. So the USB goes to the front right there. It has a blue front panel, and the audio goes right over here. It's very small and hidden. And these are important things to connect, and there's something that could be a bit frustrating sometimes, but they're quite important to do. All right, what's next?
Next step, we will connect all the front power and the LED cable to the motherboard.
Okay, so this part of the build can be the most frustrating. Thankfully, Gigabyte has a solution for you guys called the G connector. The G connector has all of the labels for these cords, which power things like the reset switch, the power switch, so on and so forth. Before the G connector, you'd have to line up the cables to the very small sockets on the board. Now, on some cases, the cables don't have great labeling, so it's quite frustrating. But with this, you can simply connect all of the cables to the G connector, and you will be in business. It's a lot easier than doing it one by one. Okay, going back to cases, it's important if you want to do things like water cooling to have the case for that. Water cooling is for more advanced users, and that requires a lot more space. So of course, that won't fit into a very small case. So if you want to go that direction, make sure you have a proper case for it. Okay, and so we're almost done with that. As you can see, with the G connector here, it's a lot easier to plug in your front switches to the board because you have the nice labeling on there, and you have a lot easier time doing this. Okay, what's next, Janus?
Next, we will set up the SSD and hard drive to the chassis.
Okay, so we're using for this build an Intel 750 series SSD and also a Western Digital 1 terabyte blue series hard drive. Now with WD, they have different lineups and different colors for all the drives, and the blue drive is more for desktop and mainstream use. You might see a black drive. That's not really for most users. That's designed for different use cases.
So we just slide the hard drive in.
Yeah, so
in the chassis.
exactly. So in our case, it comes with a nice space for all the drives. So in this case, we do have these mounts on the drives on the side, and so they will screw into the drive, and you pop it in there, and you hear a nice click, and you'll know it's securely in the case. Okay, so now it's time to connect the cables. Before we do that, just a reminder that on our Facebook page, we have a contest going on for some awesome prizes. To enter that contest, give that post on there a like and also comment on there. And tomorrow, on our OC themed live stream, we'll announce who won. Okay, so let's now connect the cables to the drives. So we have there the data cable and also the power cable. And so on these drives, we are using the U.2 connector, which is very common, and it's found in most, a lot of drives. However, there's also a new protocol. It's called M.2. And so that's a newer protocol to use. And so if you want to connect that to your board, you have to use a M.2 to U.2 adapter, which, as we'll show you guys, we have one on our board, and we'll show you guys how it plugs in to the board. So it plugs in quite easily to the board right there, and once that's connected, give it there's another screw port. Just screw it in gently so it's nice and flush against against the board. Okay, so we have a question about hard drives versus SSDs. That's a good question. So hard drives, they use a platter that's magnetic, and they have a head that goes against it to retrieve data. So typically, hard drives are higher capacity and they're cheaper. SSDs use NAND memory, like you have on your phone, to store data. So SSDs, they're a lot faster, but they have a lower capacity and they're more expensive as well. So on our system, we have an SSD and hard drive as well. So that way you can put things like your games on the SSD, and you'll improve your speed in the games, and have things like your movies, pictures, and other documents on the hard drive. They'll require the same speed as an SSD, and you have the capacity as well. But also, SSDs are silent. They don't have any noise attached to them. So that way, you won't have that classic clicking sound of a hard drive, and they're also quite reliable as well. There's no moving parts, so you have a lower chance of something being broken. Okay, what's next?
So next, we will connect data cable to the motherboard.
Yeah, so you have your connectors for data on the front, and those are the U.2 connectors, and so it just pops in the front right there, and you'll hear a nice click when it connects. Okay, what's next?
Next step, we will install the DVD-ROM to the chassis.
Okay, so we have right here a hybrid DVD, ROM, and Blu-ray drive. The thing is, these days, with things like Steam, there's less of a reason to have a DVD-ROM drive. You can buy Windows 10 on a USB, and also you can download most of your games from Steam or EA's Origin, and you don't have to go out and buy them, and there's no disc involved. In fact, with Metal Gear Solid 5 on the PC, if you bought the game in stores, the only thing on the DVD was a link, like an app, to go download that from their online store. So in our case, we still want to have a DVD-ROM drive to show you guys, how it's installed in the PC. But it's up to you whether you want to have it or not. And frankly, these days, you might not need one. Okie dokie, so
next step, we will connect the power and the data cable.
Yeah, so just like your hard drive and your SSD, DVD-ROM drive requires both a cable for power and data as well. So once that's plugged in to the motherboard, you'll be in business. Okay, so one of our viewers asks, do I have to worry about static? And the answer to that is definitely. So one way to defeat static is to touch some metal before you touch a component. So you can touch your case, that's metal, or touch something on your desk, which is metal, and that way you'll discharge any static, and you won't have a risk of damaging your board. Okay, what's next?
Next step, we will set up the VGA card to chassis.
Yes, okay, so it's time to install the VGA card. Okay, now, here's the thing. You can't just install the VGA card in any PCIe slot. If you look closely onto the board, each PCIe slot actually has a number by it. That number, in this case we have X16 and so on and so forth, or X8 and X4, it shows what is available for PCIe lanes. So you want to make sure that your graphics card is on the highest slot possible to have the most amount of lanes available, and that way you have the most amount of bandwidth to your card. So in this case, we're going to use this guy right here, which is our trusty X16 PCIe slot. So going back to static briefly, there is some resilience in new hardware with static. So, if you do have a small discharge, it's likely you won't do much damage to the board. That being said, you want to be careful when doing this, of course. There is a risk that you could damage the board with static. So, again, touch your case. You can touch a table if it has metal on it, and just make sure you're grounded first before you touch the components. Otherwise, you might have a discharge, and that will ruin your lovely hardware. Okay, so we have the VGA installed. If you noticed, we have this guy right here. It's something to make sure your PCIe cards, like VGA cards, are secure, and we have that placed down over the card. So that way, if you're going to a LAN party and you are moving around your case and it's jostled, it won't come loose and you won't have any kind of damage to your card. Okie dokie. What's next?
Step, we will connect power cable to VGA card.
Yeah, so VGA cards, they need power themselves. So we do have, as you can see, a power connector onto that we have to connect the power cables to. Now this VGA card is a G1 Gaming 970 from NVIDIA. It's an excellent mid-range card. It has the WindForce 3 cooler, and so you can really play all your games quite well, and it works great. So one more thing, our motherboards have a PCI Express metal shield on them. That way you won't damage the actual slot itself with heavier cards, because with wear and tear and constant movement, without that shielding, there's a chance that you might damage the actual slot. So if you look carefully on the motherboard, the slots have a metal shield around them, and that is our exclusive shield, and it does a great job at protecting these cards to make sure that you won't damage your board with them. Okay, what's next?
Actually, we're done. So we just connect power cable and give a mouse, then we can start to try boot the system.
Exactly.
And install the OS.
All right, so you can see we're done. All right, so that was fairly easy to build the system, but there's one more step. That step is making sure it boots. Yeah. So going back to the PCIe connectors, one of the good things about them is that they have that shield, and that shield is 3 times stronger than the competitor's shield around them. Than other PCIe slots and boards. So we ship a lot of PCs to events around the world. Gigabyte sponsors LAN parties, overclocking events, everything, things like that around the world, and we have to ship our PCs via courier. So if they're fully built when we ship them, we want to make sure they get to the event in one piece and not damaged. So these PCIe shields, they make sure that these cards are stable and they're secure on the board. All right, so tomorrow we have an overclocking themed live stream where myself and my colleagues Sophos, who's our in-house overclocker, and Dino, 22 from Australia, who's our Australian marketing manager and the OC guy down there, we will host a live stream and go step by step how to do a basic overclock, which will be great. It's going to be an awesome live stream. It'll show you guys how to get extra performance from your PC and do overclocking in a safe and easy fashion. And don't forget to enter our Facebook contest. If you go on our Facebook page, you will see that there's a post up there. Give that a like and also a comment. And tomorrow, we'll announce those winners. You can get some great prizes from Gigabyte, so be sure to enter. Okay, so it's time to boot the PC. So again, on the overclocking live stream tomorrow, we will go through basic overclocking and show you guys how to do it from a beginner's point of view. And so we will show you what to use for apps, settings, benchmarking, all that fun stuff. Okay, so our last step is to make sure that the PC actually works. So we're going to connect our monitor to the PC. That goes and make sure it boots up, and we have power. It's a good sign. And we'll just do some final checks, and then we will be in business. So the motherboard itself is the Gigabyte G7 board. You can buy that from any retailer around the world, and we do have a link on the page to show you guys. That is our page from our Gigabyte website that gives us a brief rundown of the board and shows you guys why it's a great board for mid-range users. Okie dokie. So you can see here that we are in the BIOS, and we do have the system up and running. You can see the clock speed and all that fun stuff. And also you can see on the back of the case we have the I/O panel, and the I/O panel is lit. So if you were going to build this PC and then move it to your man cave and game with that in your man cave it's really dark, you can see once it's turned on what everything is. So we have, you can see USB 3, HDMI, audio in and out, 3.1 USB, Ethernet, all that fun stuff. So one of the advantages of our Gigabyte board is actually we use Intel's new Extreme controller for USB 3.1, and this gives a lot more speed than the competition. So when you have our board, you can have extra speed from USB 3.1. Okay, so we are in the BIOS right now, which shows that we have a working PC. So, Janus, wasn't that easy?
Yeah, it's very easy.
Very easy, right? So, this took us under an hour, which is not much time at all. And, before we built this, we had all these parts just, on the table. So, it was really easy to build. Okay, if you guys have any more questions, you can ask them on the chat. We'll be on the air for another few minutes, and that way we can answer your questions from the YouTube chat. All right, so we're being asked to talk more about USB 3.1. It's a lot faster than the competition. On this board, of course, we have the Intel Extreme controller. We also have USB Type-C. Type-C is the newest USB connector out there. It's reversible, so it looks a little different from the old connectors, which you can see on the board right there. And this is the future of USB, the protocol itself. So with this, you have a lot of new features like power delivery, you have more bandwidth, and of course, the new connector. Other parts to point out. Again, we have the 970 graphics card. It's a great card from Gigabyte. It has the WindForce 3 cooler, so that means your GPU rather, will be kept nice and cool. And during your long gaming sessions, you'll have no problem whatsoever. And so, other parts to point out is we do have on there the latest Sound Blaster Sound Core audio processor, and that will make sure that you have the best sounding games and movies out there. All right, Janus.
Yep.
Anything else you can think of?
No, just need to take some time to install the OS.
Yeah, exactly. So the next step, of course, is to install the OS. Now, if you install it over, say, a USB drive, it'll be a lot faster than doing it over a DVD drive. And so it shouldn't take too long, and you can pick what you want for OS. Of course, the latest OS is Windows 10, which is just a fantastic OS from Microsoft. It's the best Windows yet. There's also Windows 7 and Windows 8. You know, Windows 10 is the latest, but some people, they might want Windows 7, Windows 8. That's okay too, but we suggest Windows 10. Now, someone's asking about BIOS. So generally, the default BIOS settings are just fine. You don't have to tweak them. But on tomorrow's live stream, we're going to talk about overclocking, and we'll talk more about the BIOS there. But generally, you don't have to change those settings. They're fine as they are. So you can see here our nice, lovely, beautiful PC. It's built. We have a really, really clean cable run through there. That's thanks to our modular power supply. You know, we only have to plug in what we need. We don't have cables, you know, it's not a rat's nest. And with airflow, you have to make sure that your cables are very neatly placed in the case. Without very neat cables, you'll have airflow problems, and you know it won't be easy to go back in there and remove, you know, add or remove parts. So make sure you have a very, very nice, clean cable run through the system. Okay, so as you can see, we can move the monitor around. We are in Windows. So we have Windows on the computer. It's running, and that means we do have a successful build of the PC, and it all works. So, you know, that took under an hour, and there's no reason why, you know, you guys can't do that yourself, because it is very easy to do. And with this computer, you know, you'll have a lot more power than the console, so you can play games like GTA 5, Witcher 3, and of course Crysis at full HD, whereas a console like a PS4 and Xbox One, it might struggle to actually play these games at full HD. Alright guys, so thanks for watching. That was a great live stream. If you have any more questions, we can definitely answer them after the show. Otherwise, keep following us on Facebook and also on YouTube, and we'll see you on tomorrow's OC themed live stream. Thanks again.
Did you see it? I asked. Did you see it? I didn't see it. I didn't see it. I didn't see it. Did you see it? Oh, Did you see it? I asked, did you see it? I didn't see it. I didn't see it. I didn't see it. Did you see it? Did you see it? Did you see it?
If your objective is Mars, for example. Neither they nor the